Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another exciting show of the Humans and Wildlife Show. It's July. It's wonderful. We're in July now. We're in the middle of summer, and I would once again like to introduce you to my co-host, Dr. Giorgia Auteri. Giorgia, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. And hello to everyone in the audience. Hi, Susan North, David Dunn, Kit Kat, David Howden, Frankman, Levine Thompson. It's so great to see you all here. So many familiar names. It's really great to know that we keep providing content that people like enough that they keep coming back.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
Shawali, welcome. Yeah, so we have a little bit of a different format for this week. As many of you probably know, or you can see down in the banner, we interviewed Dr. Shambhu Paudel, who is a Nepalese scientist who studies river dolphins, which is a freshwater species of dolphin. But it was a little bit different this week because of the time difference, we pre-recorded the interview with him. And so we're going to be playing that interview for you all. And we did solicit questions ahead of time. And so we were able to ask him about that. If you didn't see our solicitation for questions for him, make sure to follow us on Facebook and take a peek at the YouTube live stream announcement before it comes up in the future. Hi, Ambre, Miranda, Pat, Janie, Claudia, James Bourne. Yes, so many people joining us. It's great.
All familiar names.
Yeah. And so, Christian, I guess river dolphins, that's probably not the type of dolphin people first think about when they hear dolphin, right? Normally we think of like the salt, at least I think of like the saltwater dolphins.
Absolutely, and it's something that I certainly knew very little about until we interviewed Dr. Paudel, and that really was interesting. And so let's give you a little bit of background.
Who are these river dolphins?
Yeah, so
and Christian had the really good idea to pull up the One Zoom Tree of Life, which we covered in a previous episode, to give us an idea of like evolutionary context, big tree of life. Where are these dolphins at?
Right. So if you type in Asian river dolphin, or for that matter of fact, river dolphin, which I'm doing here, into One Zoom, and you start searching, you will go down to the tree where all the relatives are. And this is where you end up. You see here the South Asian river dolphin. And you can see there are two river dolphins in South Asia, in fact. And if we zoom out a little bit to understand how everything is related, we will find very soon here, if you go down here, you'll find the whales, dolphins, and which belongs to the, I think you say cetacea, which means big fish, right? To the
cetacea, yeah.
Oh, thank you, cetacea. Thank you. Good. To the big fish, and you can see how it's also related to the hippopotamus. And then if you go up further, even the very distant relatives go back to almost 50 million years, right? So now I have to try and find my way back here again because it's so easy to get lost here. So
the tree of life is really big.
It's really big. So you have the toothed whales, and here, this is what we're going to talk about, and they're in red because they're endangered. So where are the other river dolphins that are known? In fact, where are the dolphins? And you can see they are quite distant, at least that's my understanding, because if you go down further, here you find another branch called river dolphins, and there is the famous boto, which is the Portuguese name for the dolphin, of course, in the river dolphin in the Amazon. And then you have the Changjiang dolphin too, which is in the Yangtze River, also endangered. And only if you go really down that tree, very far down, you come to the oceanic dolphins. So you can see they are really distant relatives.
Well, it depends how zoomed in or zoomed out you are into the tree of life. Yeah. So, Christian, you had that really wonderful picture of the different dolphin species you had too.
Right.
Maybe it might help to see for people to see them all compared next to each other as well. Hello, Danny, Cassandra, Kirk. Thanks for joining us. It sounds like some new viewers. Yeah. So types of dolphins. So, and you can see they're divided. Most of the species are oceanic, meaning they live in the ocean, in the salt water. And then we have New World river dolphins, and those would be dolphins that live in the rivers. They live in the freshwater rivers in North America and South America. That's what, when people say New World, it's like the new world that we found. We being Europeans, preceded by indigenous people of North America. And then the Indian River dolphins are down below, but as we learned, those dolphins aren't restricted just to India. It just happens to say India River dolphins on this chart, because obviously they're not restricted to just India, because the expert who we interviewed is from Nepal, and he studied the river dolphins in his native country of Nepal, which was really cool, and not a lot was known about the river dolphins there.
So yeah, here's just a map of the Ganges River, right, which is a 2,500 kilometer river, which originates, of course, in the mountains here of the Himalaya, and goes more or less west-east through northern India, and goes through between Bangladesh and India. And this is the very long river, along with many other rivers that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think we've confused people a little bit with our tree of life, because the saltwater dolphins are like further down the branch. I think it's a little bit hard to tell from looking at that tree, but I mean, they split from a common ancestor, at some point, and both of them are still living to this day. We have freshwater and saltwater dolphins. So it can be a little bit, counterintuitive to think about things being like later on the tree versus earlier, when we're talking about species that are all living right now. Yeah. So I think, Christian, should we go ahead and start the interview?
Let's go.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we will do our best to continue answering questions that come in as we play the interview. We learned a lot from talking to Dr. Paudel, and if a question comes up that we know the answer to, though, we'll pause and give you guys an answer if we know that the answer isn't going to be shared later. Okay, so Okay, so hopefully you can see now, and here we go. Today we have Dr. Shambhu Paudel, who is a river dolphin expert from Nepal. So Dr. Paudel, nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me today, as your guest.
Yeah, of course.
I'm very happy to talk about river dolphins and its interaction with the river dependent community, something like that. So I'll bring something from Nepal to the US.
Yeah, so that was going to be my first question. You're right. Is it so glamorous and cool to be studying dolphins, much less river dolphins? So what is your superhero origin story? How did you get into this?
So that's a very good question to begin. So when I was in the graduate schools, while I was doing master degree in science at the Institute of Forestry in Nepal. So the major of my under that graduate program was the watershed management. So I was examining. I was trying to find the indicator to which examines the health of the watershed, right? So while trying to find out the indicators that examine the health of the watershed, I found that if we use the native indicator species, we can, the aquatic based native indicator species, then we can determine the quality of the catchment, the whole watershed, something like that. And from that point, in 2010, I found the information about the river dolphins, and the surprising the factor was the populations of river dolphin was going down. It's very sharply the population was declining. So that was the factor which motivated me to pursue the higher degree, taking river dolphin as the species of my professional career.
Yeah. So you had this idea, to summarize, that basically by looking at these other certain animals in the river, like the river dolphin, instead of having to measure the different types of pollution or water clarity or water flow, you could figure out just by looking for dolphins whether or not the water was healthy.
Yeah, so the river dolphin is at the top of the ecology, the pyramid. So by understanding the ecology of the top, the species and the pyramid, then we can identify the conditions of the whole ecosystem.
So go ahead, Christian.
Yeah, no, I find this very fascinating. So you're saying, in a way, the dolphins are a litmus test, right? The litmus and acid test really for our ecosystem. Can you extrapolate that also from the river system to the marine dolphins? Is there actually a cross function there, or?
So actually, so the dolphins in Nepal it's a freshwater dolphin. So it's not the marine, So they're very sensitive to the salinity level of of the water. So to me, so in the South Asia, we have only the Ganges River dolphin. So we have only the species in the Bangladesh, Nepal, and India. In Pakistan, we have different species, which is Platanista gangetica minor. So that's a very different species, and all these are very sensitive to the salinity of the water. So that's it's very completely the freshwater. It depends highly on the freshwater systems. And marine, they are very sensitive to the higher salinity level. The dolphins, which are in the marine environment, they are, highly sensitive, above 10 ppm, something like that, the salinity level.
So I can imagine that, if you put a dam or something in the river and you don't have as much river water flow, does that increase the salinity in the river because the salt water comes in more?
I think the dams, they actually alter the properties the temperature. In terms of temperature, they change the properties, the water temperatures. So that's the problem. And also dam completely block the migrations of the river dolphins, so they cannot travel upstream, downstream. They cannot maintain the genetic diversity, something like that. So that's the main problem nowadays.
The dams is the
the dam is the only factor. That's the very responsible factor to decline the river dolphin population.
But these just to give us a bit of an insight, these rivers obviously are quite muddy, right? So we would just from an outside say, well, they're not very clean, right? So how do you relate them to the health of a system if it's so muddy?
Okay, right? so before answer to that question, so first of all, I want to give you some information about what the species look like. So the river dolphin is completely blind, right? So they are using the echolocations to detect the prey, to detect the direction of the movement, something like that. So there is no.
They eat fish, I'm assuming, mostly.
So
prey.
The fish is the prey of the dolphin.
Okay.
Yeah. So the turbidity of the water, the turbidity has no relationship with the species. So
they use their echolocation.
Yeah, echolocation.
I'm sure that it interferes a little bit, maybe having all this extra stuff in the water, but not very much, not as much.
Yeah. So that's true. So still I have reviewed most of the literatures available, particularly for the river dolphins. So there is no any. So I didn't find any relationship between turbidity and the species. Something movement or something live system. There is no any relationship. Yeah.
But if they're using echolocation mainly in these very muddy waters, you said they are blind. What about their sense of smell?
Yeah, that's a very good question. But I don't know much about that area. So we need to further investigate.
That's okay. I'm just asking. It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think we've kind of got a little bit of a feel for the type of environment the dolphin is living in, what they're eating. They're eating fish.
So it's a very large. The body looks very large, and it has very long snout. So they use the snout to capture the prey, right? And they have a very tiny, very tiny eyes, but they are, there is no meaning of those eyes, very tiny, and they are.
But it's huge brain, right?
It's huge brain. Yeah. So they are very clever. They can detect, they can identify, they can look at everything, the barriers. The disturbances. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
They're very clever.
And are they have to be in rivers that are pretty big, I imagine, or do they also find their way into smaller channels?
So I think like if we talk about the distribution of the river dolphins, like they are, so Nepal is the upper limit for the river dolphin distribution. So meaning that they are limited by the the upper range is limited by the foot hills of the mountain. So they cannot travel upstream, which has very high the slope, something like that.
Yeah.
So they are limited by the foot hills of the mountains and between the foot hills to all the way down to the Bangladesh.
So how far can they migrate then? What is typical for them?
So actually, we don't have very actual data regarding the migrations of the river dolphins, but based on the literature, they are highly mobile species. They can travel, like between Bangladesh to the Nepal. So yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Do they like travel to breed? Like do they have their babies like in one part of the river and then like when they get bigger move to a different part, or are they just kind of randomly moving around the river?
I don't think they have a very particular, using the different the sites for their breeding or something like that. But yeah, so for like within the 12 months, we have 3 to 4 months like summer seasons. So during the summer, we have a very fast floating, with the debris, high, the sediment, something like that. So during the summertime, they will migrate to the tributary just to save from the high floating. So so it's like the very seasonal type of the migration pattern. But that's not directly related to the breeding or something like that.
I see. Yeah, it's more to avoid the high temperature.
And what quantities are you talking about? I mean, how many dolphins are there actually?
Okay, so like at the global scale, like global means like Bangladesh, India, and Nepal, it's between 2000 to 2,500 the individuals. But if we talk about only within the Nepal, we have less than 50.
Really?
Between 30 to 50 or something like that. That's not more than that.
Wow.
So historically in Nepal, we have from east to west. So we have like 4 to 5 the main river systems which are connected to the Ganges in India. So Ganges is in India. So the main tributaries of the Ganges River is in Nepal. So they migrate up to the Nepal, right? So we have the dolphin. Once historically it was distributed in all the river systems, but now they are limited to only 3 river systems, something like that.
I see.
Yeah.
And
that's because of them.
Yeah, because of dams. It's just, I imagine they can't move past them very well, if at all.
That completely blocked the populations,
Yeah. Before we get to the sort of negative human effects on dolphins, are there ways in which sort of average people interact with these animals in terms of like, do they see them normally in the river? I know there aren't many of them, but are the dolphins kind of acclimated to humans? Will they beg for food? Are they seen as competition by the fishermen? Like, what is most people's relationship to the dolphins?
So one of my project, the PhD project, was like to understand or to examine the interaction between fisheries and river dolphins. So I examined the relationship between fishermen and river dolphins by taking like in terms of the prey size, in terms of space, in terms of time. So the prey size means like the dolphin prefer the size of like prey size between 3 cm to like 20-25 cm, something like that. So they prefer that particular size of the prey, right? So I estimated the proportion of that size in the forecast, like
the proportion of fishes that size that's like caught by the fishermen.
Yeah. So what I found is that like more than 60% of the total prey that belongs to that particular size. So it means like high exploitation of the prey size, or I mean like there is high overlap in the dietary, in terms of prey.
Yeah, like most of the fish, 60% of the fish that the fishermen catch are the preferred size of fish that the dolphin catch.
Yeah. So that indicates there is a high, the competition in terms of the feeding habits or feeding something like that. So, but I'm not,
Go on.
Yeah, but I'm not sure, the impact of that kind of like exploitation, whether the positive or negative. I don't know about that. we need to investigate the further studies needed to understand to determine whether that kind of exploitation is positive or negative or something like that.
And I'm assuming, go ahead, Christian.
Yeah, no, just out of curiosity, just to take a wider picture now, just looking at marine dolphins versus river dolphins, is it so that marine dolphins can actually go into non-salt water or sweet water, but not vice versa? Can you comment on this? How that?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a very good question. Like to answer these questions, I think we have to go to the Bangladesh. So in Bangladesh, they have one very particular type of the dolphins, but I don't know the actual name of that species. So that species can survive, in either, like in both the marine and the freshwater, right? So, but the river dolphins, they are very sensitive to the marine environment. They cannot enter even, they are like they cannot survive in the marine environment. So yeah, so we have a different kind of the dolphins which survive. Some survive only in the river, some survive only in the marine, some in between both, mix of both.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
I see. So is there competition where the river dolphins are being negatively impacted by the marine dolphins coming in? Like they have to compete for food and stuff in the areas of the river near the ocean?
I think I don't know much about that.
Maybe not that important of a.
Yeah.
But they're completely different species, is that right?
That's a completely different.
And does it get further up the phenology or the tree? Is it really only species and subspecies, or does it go to the family and further the distinguishing between dolphins?
I think they are a different species.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why. Yeah, I think, and also the species which survive in both the marine and freshwater. So, for example, like let's say if they use happily the marine environment, they can travel up very short upward distance. I mean, they can travel up to very short the upstream. They cannot go further up. Further up means like completely in the freshwater. They cannot travel up to that environment. Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
And if you look at the Nepal and also the dolphins that you have in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and so on, and you compare that to the Amazon, right, where you have sort of the very pink dolphin, how do they compare? I don't know if you know this, but how do they compare in behavior or so? Are they completely different?
I think So I think they are completely different. Yeah, we have like 5, 6 the freshwater river dolphins in the world. So one group is in the South America and one is in the East Asia and South Asia. So these are different groups. So they are completely different. But again, in terms of like the morphology, so they use the morphology to differentiate across the different species.
And are they also pink in color? No, not at all.
We have a very gray, dark gray, something like that. It's different.
Yeah, Christian, I don't know if you saw the photo that I used as the preview for this episode.
Yes, I did see it.
I did make sure, or I tried to make sure that was the correct species.
No, I remember now. I thought you remember. You're right.
Yeah, they are very gray.
Gray, okay, good.
Yeah, even like the South Asian river dolphins, the Platanista gangetica, they are completely blind. But the South American, they have like some, some visibility. So they are very good superior in terms of the visibility compared to the South Asian river dolphins.
Their eyesight is better than the ones.
And their breeding patterns. I mean, their breeding behavior. How often do they breed? And are the males bigger than the females? And how does all this compare?
Yeah, the females are typically larger or bigger than the.
The females are larger because I think in the Amazon. And I really don't know much about it, but I read in the Amazon it's the opposite, right? The males are bigger, right?
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they come out for breeding. Like it depends upon the environmental scenario. Like sometimes they come out like within 10 seconds, 20 seconds, something like that. Sometimes they come out like within greater like 2 minutes or something like that. So the breathing pattern is completely depends upon their the underwater behavior. What they are doing, so what they are actually doing under the water that determines the breathing pattern.
That makes sense. Like if we're running, we need more air.
Yeah.
They're being very active. They're like,
and also sometimes like how they interacting with the human disturbances. Like if they find some human disturbances, they come out frequently or something like that, right? So the disturbance is also another factor.
But how do you actually really study them scientifically? Because if the water is so murky, and obviously they spend a lot of time underwater and they can turn and do all kinds of crazy things, right? They're very maneuverable. How do you study them?
So it's a very tough question. But like like using the visual technique, it's very tough to classify behavior, underwater behavior. So that's why one of my PhD project was like what I did is like I use the hydrophone to capture the echolocations of the dolphins, right? So using the echolocation clicks pattern, magnitude, something like that, and the timing of the echolocations, I derive the behavior. Like behavior means like diving, traveling, surfacing, something that kind of behavior.
So I'm going to pause it there real quick because this is getting to something where a lot of people are asking if they can't really smell and they can't really see, how the heck do these dolphins take care of themselves? How do they find fish? How do they do anything? And so what the dolphins use is they use underwater sonar. They're using echolocation, very similar to the bats I study. And so basically, like, they emit this squeak, this sound, and based on the returning sound waves, they can identify their objects in their surrounding, including their food. And scientists can also put little microphones down in the water, and they can record these dolphin squeaks and kind of figure out what they're doing from the squeaks. And Christian found a good video about this. Yeah, here it is. I can't hear it though, actually. Oh, I think it's because you're muted, Christian. I unmuted you.
Am I muted? Okay, well, let's try again.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? 1 second. Let me try again. I'm just going to spool it back a bit.
Yeah, that should be good.
Okay.
The instrument has 6 hydrophones. The sound waves travel through the water and arrive at the separate hydrophones a few microseconds apart. Based on that tiny difference in arrival times, the system's signal processing software can triangulate and pinpoint a dolphin's location to within a few meters. That lets researchers track individual animals as they move through the water. By learning about dolphin migrations, conservationists could one day create a dolphin forecast, warning fishing boats to steer clear during periods of high activity. The work is a combination of high and ultra-low tech. The team sometimes uses bamboo poles to measure river depths and relies on local fishing boats to travel the river. In case the power goes out, the team has a generator and solar panels for backup. But for everyone involved, the payoff is worth it.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that was cool because you get to see a little bit more footage of people out and about with the dolphins. But yeah, basically they can understand, like Dr. Paudel was just saying, like if one microphone picks up the dolphin's echolocation and then a second later the one lower than it picks up the same echolocation, you think, oh, okay, well, like, and then the time between those two starts getting less. You think, okay, the dolphin is diving because he's getting closer to the lower one now or something like that. So very complex what you can do with these arrays of underwater microphones, basically. Okay,
let's go on if you.
Yeah. Okay, it's similar. I study bats. We use a recording to record their echolocation, and you can tell. These are like feeding calls. This is it's Zoom. It's about to catch the insect now. The feeding is getting very fast.
So for example, so we have a acoustic trajectory, right? So we will describe the quantitative behaviors of that trajectory. So for the diving, it has the longest trajectory durations, and also we will count the number of clicks within that trajectory to derive the behavior. So we have the indicators. Using that indicators, we identify the behavior, and then finally we assign the particular behavior to that trajectory.
So what frequency are you actually recording there? Just curious. What the echolocation?
So it's like I exactly forget the exact flow. Yeah, it's It's greater than the water noise. Yeah, it's greater than the water noise.
So we can't hear it. That's just my question. Could we hear this? Or
Yeah, we can hear
oh,
that.
so it is within our hearing range. Oh, I
Yeah,
see. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So I have a question real quick. I'm going to share my screen so you can see. Like, I want to know. Oops, that's so wrong. Oh gosh, don't look at that. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. I want to share the river dolphin. I don't know why it didn't work. Why does it keep going? You don't see the dolphin, do you?
No, we do. We see the dolphin.
Yeah.
Okay, you do. Okay. Sorry,
Yes.
my computer's just being weird. Okay, so like, what are these dolphins doing? First of all, is this the species you actually study? And then it looks to me that the dolphins have been like sort of socialized, like maybe they're like begging for food. Like this doesn't look like normal dolphin behavior to me.
Yeah. It looks very different to me. You know, even the behavior looks very abnormal. I never saw, you know, kind of like he's looking. It looks like he's looking for something. You know. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I see they have no dorsal fin, or am I wrong? Right?
Yeah, I didn't see that too.
Because they don't seem to have a dorsal fin, at least not what I would think.
And on their back.
Yeah,
Let's see.
that's interesting.
Oh, it looks like maybe. Oh, that's an Amazon dolphin.
Yeah.
This was like a little one.
That's like a hump, right? That's not a fin.
Well, it depends.
Yeah.
It depends. You know,
Depends.
what you want to call. That's sort of insulting. Maybe they're like, this is my full fin.
Well, it depends. It's adaptive for needs. In the ocean, it's about speed, isn't it? Here, it's not about speed. It's about maneuverability. I would think so. The needs are completely different from.
The
Yes.
needs is completely different. Again, we are talking about like the interaction with the communities. Like one is the prey size, right?
Mm-hmm.
And another is like what I consider while studying that project was the temporal overlap. I mean the activity, the timing of the activity of dolphins and of the fishermen, the community. So in terms of time overlap, so like dolphins, they are very highly activated, from like 3 a.m. in the morning, early morning, and then they will highly activated during the morning time, and again like fishermen, they activated from the 6 a.m. right? So like it was very like when the dolphins activity was very at the peak, and the fishermen, they started their activity. The activity of the dolphin is going down, and the activity of the fishermen is going up, right? So it was very inverse relationship. So in terms of so that is the
dolphins are avoiding the fishermen.
Avoiding,
So you would say that's an adaptation. That's not a coincidence, right? That's an adaptation.
So they are avoiding the the actual the time. I mean that's the preferred time of the river dolphins, but because of the human disturbances, they are avoiding that the time.
Okay.
That's a kind of like adaptation strategy or something like.
Interesting.
Yeah, the dolphins are. It's a behavioral shift. In response to the humans. So when people aren't around, then they're still.
And the study that you did, why are there so few dolphins? Would you consider them endangered or?
Endangered.
So they are endangered. Are they classified as endangered now?
Yeah, they are classified as endangered.
And what about the fishing nets? The difficulty to get caught in fishing nets. And so on?
So I think we have basically we have very like subsistence type of fishing. So we don't have very so the use of gill net is completely illegal. But some people illegally they use the gill nets. So the problem is the gill net. But most of the time the fishermen they use the cast net. Cast net.
And why is the gill net more effective than the cast net, or?
So the gill net, obviously it catches the high amount of fish compared to the cast net. So and also the gill net, so because of the quantity of the fish, they use the gill net. So if they have a larger the quantity, higher the money they make, right?
Sure.
So what do fishermen? We know that the dolphins avoid the fishermen. Or fisher people, I should say. How do the people who are fishing see the dolphins? Like, do they see the dolphins as like eating the fish that they could be otherwise catching, or do they not really care that much about the dolphins?
They don't
like,
care much about they don't care much about what the dolphin is doing actually.
So what
Do
was
peop-
the
do other people like the dolphins? Like, I don't know if you're like, is like a little kid like excited when they see one of these dolphins?
I think the fishermen, they use the river dolphin to identify highly biologically productive area for the fishing. So they use the dolphin as a cues to identify the best habitat to catch the fish.
So tell us a little bit about your study. How long was your study, and what was the most important thing that you learned?
So actually, I have the 5 different projects. So I completed I addressed the different aspects of the river dolphins, the conservation issue. So one of the, so looking at the aquatic ecosystem, the conservation, something like that. One of the most, the pressing pressure of the aquatic system is the dam, or the diversions of the water from the mainstream, right? So that's the main factor which decline the river dolphin populations, and more important is the habitats of the river dolphins. That's why they are completely locally extirpated, and then completely changing the distribution regime, something like that. So like while conducting the literature review, almost all the papers highlighted the importance of the water management between conservation and the development structure. So meaning it's very important to identify the minimum water bypass flow or something like that. So one of my project was like identifying the minimum water flow so that we can protect the habitats, we can protect the river dolphin populations, we can maintain the longitudinal habitat connectivity in the mainstream, something like that. So I identified the minimum bypass flow to sustain the river dolphins and their habitats. So that was very important of my project.
And is that like, I don't know that much about dams. To get that minimum flow, do you make the dam shorter? Do you make it not go all the way across the river?
We're actually looking from the perspective of the biologist. As a biologist, I can design the whole structure, right? So what I did is like, so how much water they have to release, down in the downstream. So that was the research question. So I determined the minimum flow they need to release.
I see. So like when like the dams like open their gates for a little bit to let some water, and then
So that's why I quantified the relationship between flow and ecology to determine the minimum flow.
Gotcha. That sounds so important. So I have to ask: did people listen to your research? Did they say like, okay, let's open up the dams a little bit more? Or
it's a very important question. It's like, it's a very sad to say that the conservation practices for the decision-making processes in Nepal, basically in the developing countries, they are not data-driven, right? So they are not data-driven. So they are, it's very, sometimes like this made me bad. So even like the policy-making people, they don't care about what the research is telling to them. So it's very problem in the developing countries. But still, I have, as a biologist, as a researcher, I have recommended the minimum flows. Now it's the time, it's a time to consider that by the policymakers. So
and I imagine that if like the more people are on your side or aware of the problem, like the more would probably or possibly want to help. And this leads us into some of the questions that we got asked in advance on Facebook. So one of the questions is, how can communities benefit from dolphin conservation? And what are the most critical? Well, I guess I'll just leave it at that for now. How can the communities benefit from dolphin conservation? Because if more people saw like their fates linked to the dolphins, like the more would press for like, yes, follow these flow rates.
I think, if we are looking at the freshwater ecosystems, we have broadly we have two components. One is the river-dependent fishing communities or river-dependent communities, right? And on another side, we have the aquatic species. So we have to balance the both communities, right? So, like, So the river dolphin it's a very large body the animal. So it's very native and it's highly mobile species. So meaning if you conserve, if you protect the river dolphins, you are protecting the whole ecosystem, right? You are protecting whole the structure, function, process of the freshwater ecosystem. So that means you are conserving while offering benefits to the society. Like the river dependence communities, they highly rely on the river system to make their money, to make their livelihoods, right? So if we conserve the river dolphins, we are also, directly or indirectly contributing, supporting the lives of the river dependent the fishing communities. So
Yeah,
it's
so
very,
for example, what you're saying is like you said that the people who are fishing, they looked for where the dolphins are because they know that's where the good fish are going to
yeah,
be. And the reason that that's where the good fish are there is because like it has the right water flow, it has enough flow. And
Yeah.
so like it's not just that the dolphins potentially rely on this minimum flow that you're
Yeah.
suggesting. It's also the fish, the same
Yeah.
fish that
Yeah.
the people fishing are going after.
Yeah. So dolphin conservation means you are protecting the fish, you are protecting the whole the ecosystems. So ecosystem is that includes the livelihoods. I mean the social and the factors. Yeah. So we are contributing directly or indirectly to the people's lives. Yeah. And the next could be like the through the ecotourism activities, the local communities can make some money. So we have practices, in one of the river systems in Nepal, the local communities, they are making money by showing the dolphins to the tourists. So it's like the practice, ecotourism practice. Right?
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I can imagine that the flow that you have in these rivers and controlled by the dams is also very temperature dependent. If it's very temperature dependent, the whole life depends on it. Is that something you found or
so that was my that's not one time I was examining the relationship between the water properties and the health of the river dolphins. So what I found, the dolphins which are immediately just downside of the dam, so they are highly so they have some problem, the skin related problem. That could be related to the water properties, the change of the water properties, something like the temperature, diesel oxygen or something like that. Yeah. So there is some relationship between the health and the water properties, this downside of the dam. They have a very adverse impact on the skins, particularly on the skins.
That makes sense, yeah. And so that question I should have said was from Ramesh, and Ramesh had a second part to that question of follow-up, which I think you've answered all of this, but maybe you have something else to add. The follow-up question is, what are the most critical issues that need to be addressed in Nepal's efforts in dolphin conservation? And I'm assuming, the dam
is
very important.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think the dam is the very critical factor we need to consider while talking about the river dolphins and their habitats and that. Yeah.
What is the purpose of those dams mostly? Are they hydroelectric dams?
Hydropower and for irrigation for the agriculture, agriculture. Yeah, mostly for agriculture and the hydropower.
And do they make anything, for example, typically when you build dams, at least I know that from salmon, they make certain ladders for them so they can actually get up the dams. And is there no such thing for
no for the dolphins, only for the
yeah.
That's only for the very small fish.
So there's a question from Santosh. Is there any possibility that we can link upstream community of the river basin that may help to maintain healthy freshwater dolphin habitat through PES or any mechanism? PES is
payment for ecosystem services. Yeah, I think it's a very good question. It's in terms of if you look at the watershed skills, it's very important. There is a connection between the species response, in-stream habitat, and the catchment characteristics. So there is a connection between these three, the components, right? Watershed characteristics, in-stream, the physical habitat, and the species response. So it has three connections. So the activities, the human activities or any kind of activities in the upstream have really determined the quality and quantity of the in-stream habitats. Like for example, if they change the land use, the practices, the sedimentation can be, that can be goes off, right? So increasing the sedimentation means you are losing the quality of the in-stream habitat. you are losing the usable area of the the river dolphins. So that reduces the usable area of the river dolphins under the water. So
And-
it has
and
some connection.
Yeah, as an example of something that would increase sedimentation, is that like if there's a lot of agriculture happening
Yeah.
near the river?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that directly determines the the quality of the in-stream habitat. I mean, in terms of both quantity and quality. So the river dolphins is highly sensitive to the underwater the usable area. So that's if you lose the underwater usable area, so they will they completely left that part. They will completely abandon or left that particular habitat, and they will change the distribution pattern. So that means you are losing the species. So there is a
Yeah, you're like filling up this.
Yeah.
This is the river channel. You're like
Yeah.
filling it up with
Yeah.
dirt and stuff.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to go. Yeah.
So so the upstream, the human activities in the upstream, really that makes sense to the conservation of the dog.
So what are the paid ecosystem services? Is that like paying people to not farm if they stop farming near the river or something?
I mean,
what is
so
that?
payment means like so it is related to like for example, the human. I mean, the farmers in the upstream, right? So if they practice the good, I mean, the better agricultural practices that reduce the sedimentation, that improve the infiltration, that improves the biological activity, something like that. So that will improve the in-stream habitat, right? So that improves the quality of the habitat in the downstream, right? So that means if they do the better, they will get money from the downstream, the water. So for example, in the downstream, like mostly the development states, they use the water for the hydropower, they use the water for irrigation, something like that. So the local government in the downstream, they will generate the revenue from that kind of activity, and they will distribute that money to the upstream people.
Gotcha.
So that's the mechanism of the PES.
Gotcha.
Is there some financing, because you mentioned tourism, which is quite important actually, and can have a very, very good influence on the ecosystem. Is there some link between the income that they get through tourism to pay people to actually improve the ecosystem or the quality in general? Is there any link?
To my knowledge, I don't.
Okay.
I didn't see any kind of. But that's all. We actually, I think in my past the published articles, I have recommended some financial mechanism using the ecotourism activities, taking river dolphins, something like that. Yeah, I have recommended that as an option to reduce the pressure of the fishing.
Exactly.
Conditions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess I'm curious, in this time that you've been studying river dolphins, all this time, how has your attitude or opinion towards the situation changed? Like, are you more hopeful than you used to be? I know this is a bad question, maybe. What do you think? What do you think is going to happen?
So it's very tough to answer these questions, but still I'm very hopeful because we have generated the next generation. I mean, the conservation leaders. If the next conservation leaders, I mean, we have very young conservation leaders in Nepal right now. So it's very easy to convince the young conservation leaders, right? Compared to the so I have delivered all the information related to how to restore the degraded Nepalese river systems to conserve river dolphins. So I have covered all the issues related to the conservation of river dolphins and handed to the government of Nepal and also to the concerned authorities. So hopefully the last year the WWF in Nepal, the organization they prepared the dolphin recovery conservation action plan based on the my research and also including all the different research the findings. So let's hope for the better. So if they can develop some seasonal or river specific river dolphin action, something like that, we can recover the river dolphin.
Just out of curiosity, what are you currently working on? Actually, you're at the University of Arizona, right? Or
yeah, so actually I did my PhD from the University of Arizona. Yeah.
yes.
So I graduated from the University of Arizona. Currently, I'm also developing some the projects, the independent research projects based upon the findings of my PhD results. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I have to ask, as I understand it, Nepal, sort of relatively recently you had your elections. Is that correct?
Yeah, the local elections, yeah.
I will admit I do not follow the elections. Would you say that was there like positive signs in the elections? Are you like more hopeful based on how the elections went, or just more of the same?
Yeah, I think nowadays the local, that was actually the local elections. So local the elected body, they heavily consider the local level issues. So I think now at this point, I think all of the stakeholders, they are aware about the recent conditions of the river systems, and also they are aware about how we are losing the species in the river systems because of the development projects, water-based development projects. So I think slowly, I think we'll improve all the conditions in the future. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's all the questions I have. Christian, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, I'm just curious. How do you see your own development, your career in the next 10 years? Where are you going? I was curious about that.
So now, like I have spent like more than one decade in the freshwater for taking river dolphins as an indicator of river system health. So now I'm thinking broadly, so I'm trying to connect between the watershed, in-stream habitats, and the species responses. I'm looking at like from the prospect of, from the broader, the scale, like watershed scale or something like that. And I'm trying to connect, so I quantified the flow and ecology relationship, but my models did not include the social dimensions during my PhD project. So I'm trying to incorporate, the social ecology and species so that I can develop the best model to balance the water species and social issues, something like that. So that's the next step.
That's very ambitious.
Yeah. So right now I'm working on that project. So that's all.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know that scientists often, at least biologists, they often just want to do the first piece that you did and be like, okay, well, I figured out what would be best for the animal, for the nature, and so there you go. Here's the answer, and it, like you said, the implementation is so important. I did hear of a study once long ago where they were looking at setting limits in a fishery, and just as a sort of study and experiment in the social dimension. The scientists ahead of time came up with like what they thought the limits for fishing should be, but then they got instead of just imposing them on the people, instead of saying, okay, people who are fishing, these are the limits, they got like a small group of people who are fisher people from the community, and they presented them they kind of walked them through the information over like 2 or 3 days in this workshop. And then they had the people decide on what the limits would be. And the limits that the people came up with after being presented with the information were actually more strict than what the limits were going to be that the scientists had decided they would try to impose. So it just shows that you can potentially get a lot more community buy-in if you take some extra time to share and talk with people. And I don't know, which direction your next steps of your research are going in exactly, but I think that.
Yeah, so if we focus only for the species, then we cannot achieve the conservation goals. So after the 1 decade of the research, the thing that came in my mind is we need to combine, the different components that are related to your targets and your goals. So for example, in terms of ecology, we need to combine the species, the biophysical environment, and the social dimension, right? So if we can combine, and then we can find the best ways to conserve and to balance all those three, in the changing context.
Finally, what I'm just interested in is, where do you get your funding from, and is there any conservation group that people can donate to or support?
Yeah, actually, it's a very good question. While I was in the Nepal and while I was doing the PhD research, it was very tough to design and to execute all those, the research need project, to implement the research need, So during your time, I developed the project, the concept, very concise, very precise, very impactful project. So yeah, and then I applied to the different international conservation agencies, and then I secured some fundings, and using those, I successfully the conducted all those PhD projects. Yeah. To me, like if you make something change in the field, right, from your first project, then you are likely, there is a high chance to get the second funding. So you can continue your project, right? So I mean, like if your project is highly meaningful, it's very highly impactful in the field, then you can secure the international fundings. So that was my approach, right? So I made very real projects that are needed in the field, something like that. And then because of that, I got several fundings from different organizations. That was my approach to get the fundings and to execute all those research.
Yeah, and what were those funding groups? I saw that you got a Rufford grant, which is conservation oriented.
I got from different conservation agencies.
You're like, I don't remember. There's a lot.
So I got from Rufford Foundations. I got from the Oceans Conservation. That's from the Hong Kong. That was the Ocean Park Foundation, something like that. And some of the donors, they are from the US, United States. Yeah, I have a very different, and some agencies are from the United Kingdom. Yeah, so different agencies were there to perform all those projects.
Yeah.
Just asking about the donation again. Is there any way people can support the causes for conservation of river dolphins? Anything you can recommend?
So you mean?
Just if they're conservation groups or anything.
I think we have created one, the local NGO or something like that. So through that organizations, anybody can donate for our conservation project. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe you can email us the links to some organizations that you trust, and then we can share that with people in the audience. That's during when we air the episode. Does that sound good? Yeah. Yay. I'm trying to look. I was just looking up some of the places you mentioned to see if they have donations for grants, but I don't see. Okay, well, with that, I guess we're going to say thank you, Shambhu, for joining us. It was so great to have you. And I learned a lot about dolphins and the sort of social and economic conservation landscape that they're in. It was really interesting. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. I find you very inspiring and very enthusiastic, which is wonderful. We need more people like you. Thank you so much.
I'm really happy today to, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having me on this.
Pleasure.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and stop it there. But yeah, we were so excited to have Dr. Paudel with us. I learned so much about river dolphins and their conservation. Just to answer a few questions that came up here, I Googled and Googled. I don't know if you could hear me typing, but I Googled and Googled, and I could not figure out what altitude these dolphins migrate to. So they do often, as I think David Dunn pointed out, they often come from in India, which is downstream, upstream to Nepal in their migration. And actually a few years ago, they had a record early migration into Nepal, I found, where I guess because of a cyclone and the flooding downstream in India, the dolphins migrated earlier than normal up to Nepal. But there were some questions about cooperation between India and Nepal for funding. And at the beginning of the interview, Dr. Paudel sort of insinuated that there was more research happening in India for these dolphins, but not as much in Nepal. And that's why he started, that was part of what got him really interested in looking into what the dolphins in Nepal were doing. So it's always the challenge with migratory species. They're crossing geopolitical borders, how well are people cooperating with each other to get this research out. But I did put in there's a number of organizations that help give money to people in their home countries doing research there geared towards conservation. One is the Whitley Fund for Nature, which I just linked to, and another is the Wildlife Conservation Society. So both of those organizations came up multiple times as funding sources for the Rufford Grant, for example, which is was one of Dr. Paudel's sources that he got money from. So yeah, check them out if you want to help fund projects like that. Christian, other comments?
I think I think the interview said it all. At least I hope it was of reasonable or good quality, so everyone could follow. I know it's not always as easy to follow as a live interview, but anyway, I don't know what's coming up next week, Giorgia. Do you know?
I didn't even look. I don't know.
I don't know either. We will come up with something interesting.
Really put me on the spot there. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, on the topic of clarity, I have noticed that if you you can watch with closed captions potentially, depending on when you're tuning in and from where. So Twitter recently started allowing live stream stuff, and I noticed that they take a little bit longer to add the closed captions than YouTube and Facebook, it seems, because we had someone with an issue with that earlier. So we'll look more into that, and I'll try to figure out what's happening with our closed caption game at the very least. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Thanks, Klingon Warbird. Thank you, Maka, Celobs, and David Dunn, and Lady M, and so many people for joining. Yes, we really appreciate having you all, and we will see you next week. Yeah.
We'll see you next week, and thank you so much, and have a wonderful week. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye, David Howden. Bye, Daniel. Thank you.